Welcome to the One Day at a Time Recovery Podcast, where my guests share their stories of addiction, how they recovered, and the tools and practices they use to stay sober now. Well, Paul, thanks so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me, Arlene. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we met a long time ago through Omar Pinto's. I think he had me on as a guest, and I was introduced to his community, and that's when I met you for the first time. Gosh, that was several years ago.
Yeah, that was probably at least 5 or 6 years ago. So,
Yeah. Wow. Time flies when you're having fun, huh?
yeah, I guess time flies when you're in recovery, right?
In your recovery. Yeah. When you're not in jail. Yes.
You're not sleeping off those hangovers.
Exactly. Exactly. So I like to start. So this is going to be fun for me. You know why? Because I was in a little rut. I was like, people pitch me all the time on the podcast. They want to talk about their book. They want to talk, the authors, therapists, rehab, stuff like that, and I love them. I've had so much, but I was like, you know what? I feel like kind of the need to get back to my roots, right? When I first started doing the podcast, I was interviewing my friends and we were just talking about, our stories. And so I was really feeling the need to get back to that. And I could put the call out and you're like, yeah, I'd be willing to talk about my story. So I'm super grateful that you're willing to come on and educate me. And plus, you have a little bit of a different stories the way you got sober, and we'll get into it. But before we do, I have a little game I like to play called the lightning round.
Uh-oh,
I know it's
I wasn't
scary.
ready for this.
You should be terrified.
Shaking in my boots.
No, it's actually pretty easy. When you first got sober, were there any books that really helped you early on?
No, not the books per se. I more or less went with the online stuff, and
Mhm.
we'll get into that later, how I found some online recoveries. But I I work on books for a living, so.
Oh yeah, we were
So
just talking
yeah,
about that.
so when I'm away from work, I kind of don't even want to be near an actual book, but I do like to read stuff on the internet. So I read a bunch of recovery articles and I started listening to a bunch of podcasts, and that's really how I got started on the road to the
Interesting.
recovery. So
Okay, so and of course, so you're listening to Omar's the Share podcast. That was a really good one. What other ones were you listening to?
yeah, it was mainly the Share podcast. I don't even remember what the other ones were.
Did you
I
ever listen to like Rich Roll or Shane Raymer on That Sober Guy? There wasn't a lot back then,
Yeah,
actually.
there wasn't a lot back then. I think probably the other one, and it wasn't so much on the alcohol, was the Dopey podcast.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, that was kind of a wild one.
yeah,
Those guys on there were pretty wild, but that
yeah,
was fun to listen to.
yeah. I hear it's still very entertaining. Huge. They have a huge community now. Yeah, that's awesome. When you think about self-care, and it'd be so interesting to see what your sort of ideas about that. So like, 12-step people, you go to meetings, you get this morning routine. Do you have a self-care practice, like a morning routine or anything like that?
Yeah, I have a pretty solid routine. I'm pretty much a creature of habit, and once I get in a routine I like to stick with it. My biggest thing in the morning is I do a morning gratitude practice, and we can talk about that a little bit more. That's kind of my number one recovery tool. And then I do also like to go for walks outside. That's kind of my meditation. I don't do a traditional, cross-legged sit on the floor meditation.
No lotus position for you?
No, 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 no. That would be probably too difficult to get out of if I ever did get into it. But but no, I do like to walk outside in nature, and we've got a lot of great walking trails in this area. So I just
Right.
that's my meditation.
Do you know what's interesting is I used to ask people what they did for fun these days, and most people are like my age. They're all like middle aged and stuff, and so our idea of a good time. Most people are talk about being in nature, just like reconnecting with nature. It's just like a peaceful, literally grounding experience.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said,
Yeah.
that's pretty much my form of meditation. I always feel better after a good walk. So
Yeah, who doesn't feel good after a nap and a walk?
yeah, I don't do a lot of napping, but I do a lot of walking.
A
So
lot. Like, do you keep track on an app? Like, do you track your steps?
No, I'm just old fashioned that way. I usually there's a nice trail around here. It's about probably about maybe about a mile and a half, 2 miles.
Oh, that's good.
Oh yeah, if
Yeah.
I get out there, it winds kind of through a city park. We have a waterfall here, and it goes by this little river and stream and stuff. There's a lot of wildlife and stuff to look at. So
Oh, nice. Very
yeah, it's
cool.
pretty idyllic.
Do you have, I don't know what your spiritual beliefs are. Maybe we talk about that a little bit, but do you incorporate any kind of prayer? Like walking is kind of like your meditation, but do you have,
Yeah, I was raised Lutheran, and so our family went to church quite a bit when I was younger. But I'm more of a God is everywhere type of person. I see
mm,
God in nature, so that's why I really connect with those nature walks because that kind of feeds the soul.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's awesome. Um, I often wonder, like I have like sort of a theme for my sobriety, which is, like anytime I got off course, I would just find the balance. It seems to be, progress, not perfection. Obviously, one day at a time. Do you have any kind of reoccurring themes that you've noticed over your sobriety?
Yeah, the big one is gratitude, and I'm going to keep going back to that because that really is like I said, I do that gratitude practice in the morning, and if I'm having a particularly rough day and in sobriety, we have those rough days. Those don't go
Yeah,
away. So yeah, sometimes I lean on that gratitude in the middle of the day or before I go to bed at night, but definitely every single morning I do that gratitude practice. Haven't missed a morning yet. It's been over 15 years. So
that's amazing. Yeah, I remember you talking about being the gratitude guy. That's
yeah, in my online communities, I'm kind of the go-to gratitude guy, they call me.
go to gratitude guy. That's a nice alliteration to it. I love that. Um, awesome. What's one thing you wish you knew when you first got sober?
How good it was going to be.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of us, when we first give up that addiction, we think that, we're never going to have fun again. We're never going to be able to let loose or laugh or
Yeah.
enjoy music or any of that stuff. But I found that once I got through that initial first 6 months or so, that
Yeah.
my quality of life really started to ratchet up and get better.
Yeah. Yeah. The first 6 months can be rough sometimes. It's either you're on the pink cloud or your body is detoxing and you're kind of going through it. But yeah, we get past it, right? It's temporary. So let's talk a little bit about kind of how we got here. Maybe you can walk me through what life was like growing up for you. What were your parents like?
Yeah, I grew up in a pretty normal Midwestern family. I'm originally from Minnesota. And my dad was the finance director for the city that we lived in, so he had a pretty important position in the community. And my mom was a homemaker. I have two older twin brothers. They're 6 years older than me, and I was the baby of the family. So by the time my parents got through raising my two twin brothers, they kind of just let me kind of just do what I wanted to do.
They were exhausted.
Yeah, they were pretty well exhausted, just like, oh, let it. I mean, I was considered probably a good kid, I was a pretty good student, and I wasn't a real party guy until a little bit later on. But yeah, and I guess looking back on it, probably the most interesting thing, and I think what really fed my addiction was, there's probably some genetics there. My dad was an alcoholic all the while I was growing up. Like I said, he had a pretty important position in the community, and it was, things were different back then. After work, the guys went to the bar, and that's just the way it was. And my dad he was an alcoholic, but he was what I call a happy drunk. He
Mm,
was never mean. He never beat us kids or anything like that.
right.
He was always seemed to be in a good mood when he was drinking. So um,
He
I
sounds very high functioning.
Yeah, I think looking back on it, I mean, at the time, it didn't seem that unusual because, like I said, almost everybody's parents drank back in we're talking 1970s here. So,
Mm,
yeah, but it was, and his addiction got worse as he got older. My brothers moved out of the house. They were older than me. So it was just me and my mom and dad. And that's when my dad's drinking kind of really spiraled a little bit more. And to his credit, he got sober when I was 17, and he started going to AA,
Hmm.
and he stayed sober the last 31 years of his life. So
Wow.
he was actually a role model in both ways. And I got to see him at his addiction at its worst, and I also got to see his recovery at its best. So it was
Oh,
kind of a
interesting.
a double-edged sword with him. But I mean, we got along. There was never any, like I said, never any beatings or anything like that. So, but it definitely has an effect on you when you're that young and you see
Yeah.
you see your dad drunk quite often. So.
Yeah. And he was a happy drunk, but why was it if he was a happy drunk and he had a job, why was it a problem? Why did he feel like he needed to quit?
Well, he ended up getting a DUI, uh, and yeah, I think that really woke him up because he cared for his my grandmother was elderly at that time, and he really, he had to take her places, and all of a sudden he had his
Mm,
license taken away, and I think that was really a wake up call. And plus, there had been some other incidents with I think just he just knew it was time, I think. And I know my mom and him went round and round on it, especially after my brothers left the house.
yeah,
And
it sounds like it
yeah,
was a problem for her.
yeah, it was a problem for her. And she almost left him a couple times over it, but
Yeah.
they always seemed to work it out. And I guess he had to reach his bottom, like we all do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
but I think
And
the DUI was the catalyst for him.
yeah. And it must have been hard for you watching your dad go through all this. And did that well, that didn't deter you from drinking then.
No, I had actually already started by that time.
Yeah.
I was a pretty painfully shy child. And when I reached the age of 14, my older cousin, who was about 2 years older, he was able to get alcohol. And I'll never forget that first weekend when he bought that six-pack of beer and some cheap wine. And I didn't care much for the wine, but boy, did I like that beer. And I loved that feeling that it gave me because it brought me
Yeah.
out of my shell.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's the social lubricant, right? But
Suddenly you can talk to girls and you're funny and
yeah, I mean, just I was not comfortable in my own skin as many
right.
teenagers are
Yeah.
not. But I think in my case, it was a little bit extra. I mean, I was always, like I said, I was pretty much a painfully. I think my parents were probably worried about me for a long time there, is how shy I was.
Mm.
And I always aspired to have a career in radio, and I thought, well, how am I going to be able to talk on the radio if I can't even, can hardly talk in front of strangers?
Yeah.
So I just loved that feeling that the alcohol provided, and it really
Yeah.
let down the barriers. And that's where it all started. I was 14. I mean, I hear this story a lot, right? I mean, a lot of us start when we're teenagers, and
Yeah.
I was no exception to that.
Yeah, there's something about that 14th year. I think that's when like all the hormones start kicking in and you become sort of conscious, like self-aware. It's like, yeah, that's a rough period. So you drank for quite a while. Is that fair?
Yeah, I can just kind of quick go through the progression here. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version.
I mean,
Like I
listen, you can give me the dirty details too.
Well, there's some of that in there, but
Yeah.
yeah, I started with beer, and I ended up circling back to the beer, but I quickly graduated, to the harder stuff. My cousin was older and he was able to get it, and we were drinking buddies pretty much. And so I got pretty much, on the hard stuff, maybe probably about once or twice a month. We'd really,
And you're talking hard alcohol, right? Like
yeah,
whiskey or
yeah. I think Southern Comfort comes to mind. Uh,
oof, that always gives me the
Yeah, looking
I had
back
a
on it,
couple of bad experiences with Southern Comfort.
yeah, that kind of stuff, and it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
mostly gin and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I went away to college, and this was the same town where my cousin lived at. So I just continued the party into the college years. And the second year of college, I had what I call my lost weekend, where I start drinking on a Friday and wake up on Sunday and have no clue what happened in between.
Wow. A whole weekend of blackout.
Yeah, pretty much. And that scared me. And then as I came out of that on that Sunday, as I was detoxing, I had some kind of seizure. I think
Wow.
it was like a full-blown stroke, I think. But luckily I mean, I didn't even go to the doctor or anything. I just kind of just it came and went, thank
Hmm.
goodness. But I
Yeah.
think I was young enough and strong enough where I was able to get through that. But that really scared me. It didn't
Yeah.
scare me enough to quit totally, but it got me off the hard stuff. And so I said, well, from now on, I'm just going to stick with beer.
Okay.
And of course, you can't be an alcoholic if you just drink beer, right? I mean, literally, that's the way a lot of people thought back then was,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I'm sure there's still a few of those out there.
yeah, right. And so I pretty much stuck to beer through the rest of college. Graduated college in 1988. I got a job in radio. And so, being on the radio, and I was the morning man, so I had to be up very early. So I pretty much curtailed the drinking quite a bit during that first radio job. And then I got my current job, which I've been at now for over 32 years, a
Amazing.
publishing company called Record Research. And so I moved away from the family and stuff and moved about 6 hours away to Wisconsin. And if you've ever been to Wisconsin, we're always one of the drunkest states in the union. I
Did
think
not
we
know.
have, I got out of the top 10 drunkest cities, I think Wisconsin has like at least five or six of them.
Is that right?
Yeah, and I moved to Milwaukee, which is, of course, the beer capital of the
The
world.
beer capital, yeah.
Yeah, so I was set, and I was pretty much just a weekend warrior for quite a few years. So, and I used to love going to the bars and stuff. And I did that for quite a few years when I was here, just kind of sticking to the weekends. And then I got a DUI in November of 2003. And so I decided, well, I'm just going to do my drinking at home. And as a lot of us know, when you isolate, that's when the problems really start. And I really started to isolate. I was working some crazy hours. So I would just get home and I would just start drinking. Again, just mainly sticking to beer, but I could drink a lot of beer. By that time, my tolerance, I mean, I was, and slowly, it was just Friday, Saturdays nights, and then all of a sudden, okay, I can start drinking on maybe Thursday night. I'll start a little early. Maybe Wednesday, I could sneak in, and pretty soon it got to be pretty much every day of the week. I could easily drink a case of beer in one
Wow.
sitting,
In a
and
sitting.
yeah, it
How
was
many, I forget, how many beers are in a case? Like 24?
24. Yeah.
Ooh, that's a lot of
Yeah,
calories.
that's a lot of liquid and a lot of
Liquid.
alcohol.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're only drinking beer, but you're drinking that many beers. And alcohol is alcohol no matter how you get it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I remember, I think it was like in high school or something, or a glass of wine has this much. A shot, a shot, a glass of wine, and a beer all have the same amount of alcohol in it. The volume is different, but it's the same amount of alcohol.
Right. And like I said, I was just drinking and that
Yeah.
was an average weeknight. On the weekends, I could get closer to two cases, you
So
know.
were you one of those guys that was like buying your cases from different places?
Yeah, I did the rotation, the liquor store rotation. I did
Yeah.
that a few times. I mean, I I didn't do it that often because I really didn't care at that point. I just had to get it. And of
Yeah.
course, I always had to have at least a case in the fridge at all times
Okay.
in case there's a natural disaster or something and I can't get to the liquor store. I
I
have
hear
to have
you.
my beer to survive. So
I understand.
yeah. But I mean that's and it's and it's not cheap. It's an expensive habit to drink that much.
Yeah,
But
that's a lot.
yeah. But like I said, you're this is a progressive disease and you need more and more to get that same effect. And I was always chasing that original high that I got when I was 14. I was always trying to get
Yeah.
back to that place.
Yeah.
And
How was drinking like that affecting your relationships?
well, I pretty much was uh, just basically working. I've been single my whole life, so I've never been married. So that really wasn't an issue.
But it kind of was.
Well, it was, yeah.
I
But
mean, listen, that's isolation can be very lonely, very, very dark. I mean, I know a lot of people who just end up in such a dark place. It's a depressant, and the isolation can lead to depression. What kind of what did it do to you in the end there?
oh, for sure. It like I said, it was just a progressive thing, and it really I really did go to some dark places there, especially the last year or so.
Mm,
About a year before I stopped, I went to the doctor. I was having some health issues. I wasn't quite sure what the problem was. And that's when the doctor first said that, he looked at my liver enzymes and said, because of course, being a typical alcoholic, I lied to him about how much I was drinking.
yeah,
I only have, two or three a night. I didn't say cases, but you know, and
an
he looked
hour.
at that. He looked at those liver enzymes, and he said, "Mr. Haney, you're drinking more than that."
Oh,
And yeah, and so that scared me a little bit. But so I probably laid off for maybe a month or two after that. But then I really started ramping up again. And again, you're always trying to get to that place.
yeah,
You know, one beer is not going to do it. 10 beers often wouldn't. I would just be getting warmed up by that point. So
yeah.
yeah, and I started, going to some very dark places. I definitely had suicidal thoughts and, just a woe is me. Um, there's no way I can ever break this addiction. I'm just going to end up either dead or probably dead because I wasn't going out. I wasn't going to get another DUI. I wasn't going to risk that.
Right.
So yeah, it was, and unfortunately, the liquor store was only a block from my house. So I didn't have to get in the
Easy
car.
access.
Easy access, exactly. I mean, I would have found a way to get it anyway,
Yeah.
but yeah, like I said, I was going to some very dark places, and I was against my true nature. I was very cynical, very
Mm,
bitter, and yeah, that's not good for relationships either.
yeah.
So yeah, I just was literally coming to the end of my rope, and I guess this is where it got the darkest was in probably around, I want to say around May of 2009. I really started getting like the morning shakes.
Oh, DTs and
Yeah, that really started scaring me. When you go to get coffee in the morning or whatever, and you pull out your wallet and your hand is you can barely get the money out of the wallet. You're shaking so bad. I mean, that
yeah.
that scared me. And so um, what brought everything to a head was it was Father's Day of 2009. I called my parents every Sunday because I lived several hours away. So
Mm.
I had a ritual of calling them every weekend. It was every Sunday I called. And this happened to be Father's Day. And so I called to wish my dad a happy Father's Day. Well, I hadn't had anything to drink yet, and he could tell I was a little bit shaky even just over the phone.
Wow.
So he knew something was wrong, and he didn't really want to come out and say it, but he had been through it himself, so I think
Mm.
he knew
He could
that
spot it.
he could spot it. Yeah, even just like I said, even over the phone, even in a brief phone conversation, he could tell something was off. So my last day of drinking was really not that much. I tried to go as long as I could. At this point, I couldn't even go a full day without having at least a few beers.
Right.
So just to maintain, I had to have at least a couple. So I think I maybe had maybe about 4 or 5 that day, and I went to bed and I wasn't sleeping, and I hadn't had a good night's sleep in many years,
Mm.
and it was really catching up with me, just everything was kind of crashing in on me. And
Yeah.
so the next morning was a Monday morning. I went to work and I just started freaking out. And I think I scared the heck out of my coworkers. They didn't know what was wrong with me, and I didn't want to tell them why I was basically in a full-blown panic attack.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my heart was racing and I literally felt like I was just babbling and you know, but
Were
not
you
but yet not
coherent?
admitting what was wrong.
Yeah.
So finally, my coworker who still works here to this day, he said, "We're going to take you into the hospital." He said, "Something's wrong." I said, "I don't know
Yeah.
what's wrong, but we're taking you to the emergency room." Well, they finally talked me into it after a couple hours.
Whoa.
Yeah, and I ended up in the emergency room. And as soon as I came in, all of a sudden, nothing, the lies and stuff didn't seem to matter anymore. I was actually truthful for the first time. I told them exactly how much I'd been drinking.
Wow.
And they took my blood pressure. My blood pressure was through the roof. It was like 200 over something. I mean, I was about ready to stroke out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and let's see, I would have been 43 years old at this time. So, it's not something that I thought was normal for a 43-year-old to be going through.
Mm-mm.
But
Yeah.
the nurse was I'll give the nurse credit. She's like, well, we've seen this before. She says you're going through withdrawals, and
We've seen this before. Love
yeah,
her. Yeah.
here I thought I was special, but they put me in a room and they hooked me up to IV just to get some fluids in me because I
Yeah.
was dehydrated on top of
Yeah.
everything else.
Yeah.
And I really started to relax quite a bit. And I remember they left me, my coworker had to go back to the office. So I was all alone in this emergency room. And I just remember looking up at the fluorescent lights. And I get emotional when I think about this because I think for the first time I was honest with myself
Yeah.
about the situation I had put myself in. And I
Mhm.
realized that I call it my moment of clarity.
Yeah.
And thank God I had that moment because I think that truly um, was the moment that saved my life. And like I said, I get emotional thinking about it because it was,
Yeah.
and I have not had a drink since that day.
Oh my God.
So it was, like I said, it's a moment that even 15 years later still sticks with me.
Yeah. So powerful. Just the, what was it? Was it the honesty? Just like the denial?
Yeah,
Like,
I think the walls came crashing down.
yeah.
I think I literally hit my bottom.
Yeah.
It was a pretty good thud too.
I bet. I bet. In those dark moments, not everybody chooses to survive. And I wonder, what was it that kept you going?
Well, I guess the big thing was, and this is a part of the story is too, that they were originally going to keep me because they knew I had to detox.
Yeah.
And the doctor actually came in and the doctor scared the hell out of me too because he said, "Mr. Haney," he said, "if you don't stop drinking, you will be dead within a year."
Oof.
So yeah, that was probably some motivation too.
That'll do
But
it.
yeah, well, it doesn't do it for some people, unfortunately,
You're
but
right. You're right. It
but it,
doesn't.
but it did for, I mean, that helped. But he said, "Unfortunately, we don't have any beds in detox at the moment." Apparently they were, like I said, it's Wisconsin. They
Yeah.
were they were full
They were
up.
busy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were busy. So uh he said, you're going to have to detox at home. He said, of course, but if you have any, if you start having problems, call 911 right away because it can be dangerous
For
to
sure.
detox on your own, especially as
Super dangerous.
yeah, especially as far gone as I was. So I said, well, and he actually suggested that I taper. He goes,
Okay.
you might want to. He said you may want to keep a few beers on hand just in case, you know. And I said I knew I wasn't going to do that. So as soon as I got home, they discharged me, and as I was able to drive myself home and all that. So I felt
Okay.
a lot better.
Okay.
I think I made the decision when I looked up those lights that I was going to change my ways. I just didn't know exactly how I was going to go about it yet, but I knew something had to change. So I got home and I poured out the rest of the beer and made a phone call to my dad.
Oh, yeah.
And as part of the, I'm sorry,
No, you're fine.
as part of the honesty, I told him the entire story, what happened, and of course he was supportive.
Hmm.
Said that, yeah, he said I knew you had a problem. He said when I
Oh, he
talked to you on the
knew.
phone, yes. He said I could tell when I talked to you on the phone something was wrong.
Hmm.
So, you know, he was very supportive of that. And my mom was listening in on the phone call. And so, yeah, I'm very lucky that way to have supportive parents.
Yeah. Did he
So
encourage you to go to AA?
yes, he did. He said, you know, give me a call later in the week when you get through your detox and we'll talk
Mhm.
about that. And I had a pretty rough couple nights there. I had I had pretty much some more of the DTs. I was seeing things and
You're
hallucinating.
hallucinating.
Yeah.
Wow.
Had the night sweats. I guess the night sweats was the way I mean my sheets were completely soaked with sweat.
Wow.
But again, I knew the doctor told me that it was going to be a rough couple days. And so I kind of knew what was coming. So, but luckily I was able to get through it. I was able to eat a little bit and you know, I still went to work and somehow got through that. And
Y'all went to work.
yeah, went to work the next day.
Oh my God.
Don't think I got a lot done, but my coworkers were glad to see me that I was still alive.
Yeah. It's probably good to get out of the house.
Yeah, yeah, it was good to, you know, kind of get my mind. I was a little bit better like during the day. The nights were, like I said, the first couple nights were tough, but
Right, right.
it got better. It got better fairly quickly.
Okay.
I think by the end of the first week, it was, you know, then I decided that, and that's when I called my dad again, and that's when he suggested that I go to AA
Yeah.
because he had went to AA for at least he went for about 6 or 7 years, and then he stopped going.
Hmm.
He never told me why,
Hmm.
but
And he never drank again?
he never drank again. And
Hmm.
he did whenever I would go to visit them. My dad was an early riser, and he would be
Hmm.
down at the breakfast table in the mornings when I would get up, and he would have two books open. He'd have the Bible and the AA Big Book.
Oh, yeah.
He'd be reading out of both of those.
Okay.
So
That
I
was
knew
his morning routine.
that
Yeah.
was his morning routine. Yeah.
Got it.
So even though he stopped going to meetings for whatever reason, he still kept up on the principles of AA. So he suggested that, and that's when I started looking into the online resources because I
Mm.
was still working a lot of hours, and I just, you know, I was, you know, although I know I could have got a meeting in if I wanted to, but I luckily I found a website called Sober Recovery,
Hmm.
and I discovered that probably about 2 to 3 weeks after I first got sober, and I started going there and posting on the message boards, and I was really liking the feedback I was getting.
Hmm.
There's a couple of administrators there. We all go by handles. We don't go by our real names on there. But
Oh, it's like it's anonymous.
yeah, it's an anonymous
Okay.
deal, pretty much. I mean, a lot of them know who I am anyway. But as
Yeah.
far
But you
as
can be anonymous if you want to.
right, exactly. And
Yeah.
anyway, there was a guy. There were two administrators there. One is still there. His name is DEE. He was very welcoming.
Nice.
And there was another one there named Carol. She's unfortunately since passed away, but
Mhm.
those two really gave me some real solid advice and encouraged me to keep posting. I have a pretty good way with the written word, and so
Mm.
I I was making some posts and making some connections there.
Mhm.
So, and another thing I like about that website is they have different, like little different subgroups that you can join. And one of them was a gratitude, morning
Wow.
gratitude. And I think that's where I really got the idea to start
Yeah.
doing this gratitude practice. And what's cool about that is not only do we post our gratitude, but you get to read everybody else's.
Oh, that is so helpful.
Yeah, it really is. It's like, we just feed off each other.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I found a lot of support there. And actually, that was really until I started, looking around for these podcasts. And later on, I did join Omar Pinto's online group. And I actually
Um,
started hosting a weekly meeting there.
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I did that for a few years. And a lot of it was based around gratitude. It wasn't a gratitude only meeting,
Yeah.
but it always came back to that for some reason. But
Yeah, no, it's magical. It's so interesting because you're talking about all the components, right? Like, and I'm sort of recovery agnostic. Like, I don't care how you do it. The only thing I know for sure after 30 years of being sober is I have no idea what's right for anybody else. That's the only thing I know for sure. I know a lot of stuff, but that's the one thing I know for sure. But you mentioned sharing, journaling, connection, being of service. Do you know what I mean? It's like, feeding your brain information, being open to, seeking advice or feedback. Like those are really all, but it sounds like it was in a really safe environment. I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but is that a fair assessment?
yeah, it's funny because when I first started going to Omar's group, he said one of the first things he told me, he said, he said, I can't, first, he said, I can't believe you've never been to an in-person meeting. He says, you know, all the jargon. He said, for a guy
Oh,
who's never been to a meeting, you sure talk like you've been to meetings. But I said, well, I really have. I've just done it in a
yeah.
non-traditional way.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a weird source of pride with me, even after 15 years sober. I've still never been to an in-person meeting, believe it or not.
Source of pride. Ooh, I see a challenge in your future.
Yeah, I know. I've got guys who say, "Come on, you should go." And
I
if
mean,
you know
it
me,
is, listen, at the end of the day, it is a different experience. And, you get to choose what you want out of life. And if you're happy, then cool. I mean, who cares? Like that's the end goal. And gratitude is the secret to life is wanting what you already have, right? In a lot of ways. So listen, I have no judgment. I'm greedy. I like to get the most out of everything. But to your point, it's like I don't really do a lot of in-person in meetings anymore, but it's the feelings are all this. You know what's funny? In AA, people used to get sober through letters. Letters. And when COVID hit and everybody had to go online, people were freaking out. Oh, you can't get sober online. I mean, listen, you're living proof that that's not the case. And I'm like, people get used to get sober through letters, so we can absolutely get sober on Zoom for
uh,
sure.
it's funny you mentioned that. My mom had two pen pals that she started writing to in high school, and she kept in touch with them her entire life, and they never once met in person.
Wow. And I bet those people were closer to her than some of her family.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they shared pictures and stuff, but they never actually met in person. It was incredible. I couldn't believe that.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they were a couple of her best friends.
that's amazing. So do you feel like you just feel safer like like being online? Is it a safety thing? Is it
It's just I kind of just found my tribe. And
yeah.
and I don't have anything against uh any of the other ways to get sober. I think it's great. I have your philosophy. If it works for you, then that's what you need to do.
Yeah, that is what you need to do.
I mean, if I ever found myself stuck and felt like I needed an in-person meeting,
Mhm.
the funny part is I had this one person who approached me through Omar's group. happened to be a local person here,
Mhm.
and she was terrified to go to a meeting. I said, "I'll go with you." So that was my chance. But then I never
She
heard from
didn't
her.
go?
No, she didn't. She did. I was willing to go. I said, "Hey, it might be good for me too." But
Yeah.
oh, that I might have got hooked on it at that point. But again, I haven't felt the need to pursue that. I'm open to it if I ever
Yeah.
feel the need. But I've
Yeah.
just been the last 15 years have literally been the best years of my adult life.
Mm.
And so, I'm not going to screw up a good thing.
That's fair. I mean, it's so funny because it just made me think that my husband, he was like, he's been sober for 35 years. He goes, and he really doesn't do meetings anymore. He hasn't for a while. And he's like, you know what? I'm just done digging. He's like, I've done all the digging I need to do. He's like, I'm done. I was like, well, good for you. I don't have a problem with it. That's cool. Whatever. I don't know what's right for him either. He's
Yeah,
doing.
that's just it. We've all got to, we can't tell. I mean, it's one thing I figured out pretty early. And I think my dad knew this too, that, you can't tell somebody how to get sober.
No.
All you can do is share your experience and
Yeah.
help somebody. I mean, I'm a pretty private person. It takes a lot for me to like come on something like this and talk
Yeah.
about myself because I'm just not wired that way. But if it's going to help somebody, I'm all for it. So
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And it will help a lot of people. This goes out to about, 20,000 people. Not to not to frighten you.
no, no, that doesn't frighten
It's
me.
really just us.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And don't forget I was in radio. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're good.
I'm just, they always told you just pretend like you're talking to one person. And
Yeah.
basically I am just talking to one person. I'm talking to you right now. So,
Yeah, yeah, being in the present moment. Tell me a little more about your gratitude practice. And I want to preface this by saying, when I coach people who, typically don't feel comfortable going to 12 step for a variety of reasons. And, I'm all about meeting people where they're at. And but one of the things I do encourage people to do is I use something called the 5 minute journal. It's a I have one here, but it's just a nice little journal that has like three things that you're grateful for, three things that would make the day great, and like an affirmation, and then you can kind of do a nightly wrap up of like what are three things that went well and what did you learn type of thing. And it's so interesting because when I present this idea of doing a gratitude list to people, and I'm sure you've had this experience with other people too, like they don't know what to write. And it's so funny, like being on this side of a gratitude practice that I've done for decades. It's like, wow, there's 1,000 things that go right every single day. And our brains, we have like this negativity bias that we're always looking for danger, right? I get it's just like a survival thing. But what is your advice to somebody who is just starting a gratitude practice?
well, I know when I first started to think about gratitude, I always thought I had to be grateful for, like, the super big things in life. You know, I had to wait till something big happened before I could be grateful. But you know what? I'm just grateful to wake up in the morning.
Mhm.
And I'm grateful for the roof over my head. And
Mhm.
in the winter, I'm grateful that I have a snow scraper in my car. It's just
Oh,
it's kind
little
of
thing.
it's kind of funny when you think about it, but you can be grateful for anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be something big or just, you know, and like I said, when I go to my website, then I am able to see everybody else's gratitude, and that gives me ideas. Like,
Yeah.
wow, I never thought of that. You
Yeah.
know, I'm
Can
grateful.
you?
I'm grateful for the person that invented the internet because I get to be
Yeah.
in this great community. That never even came to mind to be grateful for something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much. I try to do one little thing, like something small. Like I was, grateful for these, fun little stickers that I give away in my little. I like to make soap, so I like put little stickers in the gift. I was like, my goodness, all you have to do is go on Etsy and there's all these magical people on there making stickers and it's like, wow, I'm so grateful for that. And then I try to do something big, like something like, thinking about how grateful that I am that my parents, they weren't perfect, but because they were the way they were, like I developed some character traits. I got strong in some areas out of necessity. But like my mom had a gratitude practice. She would tell me, "Oh, I'm so great. I paid bills today. I'm so grateful I have the money to pay my bills." And I was like, "What crazy ass person is grateful for their bills?" But it was amazing. Like she ended up like amassing a fortune. I mean, and I think it's because her beliefs around money were so positive. It was really like I grew up and I was like, oh, she was a genius. I had no idea. So like I'm super grateful for stuff like that. But it's all I always feel, do you feel obligated to put like basic things down? Like, okay, I'm grateful for my sobriety, I'm grateful for my husband, I'm grateful for my health. I kind of
Yeah.
shorthand it.
There's one thing I always put because sometimes I do get a little stuck, or
Oh,
sometimes I'll just kind of be rushing through it, and I like, well, what am I going to put today? I already did that one, you know.
you try to do different things every
I
day?
try, yeah, I try to change it up as much as I can. But there's one thing I always do put. I am grateful for another day sober
Yeah. Yeah.
because, I couldn't. There were years there where I couldn't string more than a day or two together for like 10 years.
Painful.
But to think that I have, I'm approaching 6,000 consecutive days, which is, I never thought that would be possible, you know.
6,000 days.
Yeah, and I know, I mean, yeah, people have a lot more than that, but you know what? For like I said, for this alcoholic,
Yeah,
that's a miracle.
it really is. That's amazing.
So yeah, but to get back to what you were mentioning before, I'm actually grateful that I went through um, all those years of addiction. I know
Oh,
that sounds weird to say when I tell it to people. They're like, "What do you mean you're great?" Well, I wouldn't be the person I am today
yeah,
if I hadn't gone through that. I wouldn't have the perspective that that gave me. And I like to work in the communities. I like to work with newcomers because it reminds me of how things were for me, and I know how difficult it is. And I've seen, well, you've been around this game a long time. You've seen a lot of friends who don't make it,
yeah,
who are either, who are either relapse a lot or I mean, I had a very good friend who passed away because of this addiction a couple years ago, and it's heartbreaking every time it happens. But
yeah,
I'm also going to be there if they need someone to listen.
yeah. Is that how when you say you work with newcomers, you just make yourself available to listen?
Yeah, yeah, it was more so with the online group. I
Yeah,
was always, like I said, I hosted a meeting, and anytime
yeah,
I could get a newcomer to a meeting, it was like, wow, this is great. I mean, I loved the regulars of obviously
yeah.
that came every
Obviously,
week.
yeah, yeah,
But boy, when I would see a new face pop in, I'd be like, wow, this is great.
yeah.
Or the merrier.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a lot of service work. So are you still doing a lot of writing? Are you still you're still involved in that same community, the sober recovery?
Yeah, yeah, I've actually been there now, like I said, pretty much since like about the second week I recovered. So uh,
Wow.
yeah, and again, I'm on there doing my gratitude pretty much every day. And if I for some reason I can't get on there, I'll just quick write my own little journal.
Right.
But I try to get on there as much as I can. And we have some other subgroups too. We have like a 1 year and over group for, those of us that have a little bit longer term
Yeah.
and there's a newcomers group that I try to pop in every once in a while. Like I said, I really like helping the newcomers because
Yeah.
I know how hard it was. And there were some people, even in that group when I first joined, that, well, you're not going to AA, then you're not doing something right. Well, I just learned quickly to ignore those people.
Oh man. Ooh, you know what? One of the things I write about in my book is that the program and meetings are two separate things.
Yeah.
Like, and I really appreciate the process of the steps, right? And you know, the meetings are supposed the people in the program are intended to work together, but they don't always, because there's a lot of people have a lot of attitudes and opinions.
Yeah, and you find that even in the online groups. The
Well, I
nice thing about
mean,
the nice thing about the online group is you can put them on ignore, or
I
maybe you can't do that so much in real life. But
think in real life people just go to different meetings.
yeah, yeah. How come we haven't seen so and so lately? Well, maybe you're the reason.
Yeah. Well, I always found, what I thought was really interesting is I have come to understand that when I would go to meetings and issues would arise with other people, I'd go and talk to my sponsor about it, and I would learn something about myself. Right. And as I learned something about myself, I typically learned some kind of compassion for myself and for others. And so it was actually beneficial to be bumping up against these people that were challenging and a variety of ways. But it was like that analogy of like a gemologist will take two amethysts and put it in a tumbler. And as they tumble together, they rub off the rough edges and they come out smooth. And I almost feel like in all these meetings, like AA, whatever online groups, people are going to be people, right? They're, wherever you go, there they are. But it's interesting how when you bump up against these people and you talk it over with somebody else, you learn something about it. So it's important actually to have these assholes in your life.
Yeah, you can make chicken salad out of the other stuff, right?
I
But
mean amethysts. Excuse me.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
But no, it's yeah, like I said, and another thing I wanted to mention too is another thing I never thought I was going to find in recovery. We have a mutual friend, I think you know, Buddy C.
Oh yeah, I love Buddy.
Yeah, Buddy has these Tao Te Ching meetings, and
Yeah.
here I am, this Lutheran kid from Minnesota. All of a sudden,
He's a redneck, isn't he?
oh yeah, well Georgia redneck through and
Georgia.
through. He
Yeah.
would be the first to admit it too.
Yeah, I love Buddy.
But yeah, but here I am, this kid that was raised Lutheran, in Minnesota in the Midwest, and all of a sudden I'm getting into the Tao Te Ching, and it's like,
Yeah.
I'm not a Taoist, but I certainly understand and I love the principles, and so I attend those
Yeah.
meetings quite a bit too. I found a nice group there too, so
Yeah.
I'm just kind of floating in and out of some of these groups, but yeah, wherever I can be of service. Like I said, I was a self-centered jerk for a long time, and
Mhm.
that's not my nature. And but the alcohol kind of turned that. One of my favorite sayings is, alcoholism is progressive, but I found that my recovery's been progressive.
Ooh, that's good.
So
I've never heard anybody say that.
really,
I haven't. Yeah. It's true. It is progressive. Well, the truth of the matter is, it's like the world is moving so fast. If you're standing still, you're actually regressing. Seems like you're either progressing or you're regressing. There really is no stagnation. Stagnation is an illusion.
yeah, I think the big key too, and something I try to impress upon like the newcomers is that I had to make a total and complete surrender. And to be truthful, I think I touched upon that, in my story, that
Yeah.
I finally, once that whole wall came tumbling down, that's really when I could start healing.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's no question in my mind that I would have been dead within a year or two if I would have kept up with it. And the old me might have been fine with that. Sad to
Oh,
say, but
yeah.
that's where my head was at that time. And
Yeah.
it was basically a slow suicide is what it was.
For sure. Yeah.
So
Well,
I'm
something in you wanted. something in you wanted to survive.
Yeah, so that's why I just love being of service, because why else are we here if we're not here to help somebody else? So,
Exactly. That's beautiful. Well, listen, thank you so much for being willing to come on and share your story. You're not promoting any books or service.
no, I got nothing to plug. So,
Not in the plug. Yeah.
other than maybe the sober recovery website, if somebody wants to check that out.
Yeah, that sounds really great. I mean, it sounds like, listen, you're hitting all the things, right? You have a spiritual practice, you have a gratitude practice, you're in service. You know, the magic happens, they say, when the self-centered person becomes the giver. And that's definitely, I mean, you embody that transformation and you listen, it opens up a whole new world, you know. So thank you so much for being willing to be of service here and in the work that you do. And it's just been a joy to hang out with you today.
Well, thanks for having me, Arlena, and don't be surprised if you find yourself on my gratitude list tomorrow morning.
Oh, thank you. You just made my day. You have a great night. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.